the ICMCI Future Leaders Forum does bring together young consultants, and as Gorgana would like to put it, empowers us to kind of go out into the world and to meet new people, share knowledge and ideas, and collaborate on thinking, and really give us a platform to come together and start to build our international network. So it's been a great platform, and I'm happy to see the folks on the call today. I think it's going to be a great discussion. A quick introduction of myself, and then I'm going to pass over to Dwight to give you his introduction. So I work for Deloitte Canada. I'm actually calling in from the beautiful city of Halifax in Nova Scotia, Canada. I've been with Deloitte for 2 years now. I work strategy and operations is what it was formerly called. We're now operations transformation. Public sector transformation is my focus. The majority of my work to date has been in the healthcare sector, although I've jumped around a bit, but my work previous to Deloitte was actually in legal services, legal profession as a support, and that was also a focus in public sector. So I've worked with clients across education, justice, lots of different labor groups. So I'll bring a bit of a public sector view, and I know Dwight has a bit of a private sector view, so you'll get a good matchup today, I think, and a good discussion. When you think about your career journey and your leadership journey, when we're talking about the future of consulting, the catalyst really is those disruptors that have been happening. And so if you think about disruptors in past periods of consulting, and perhaps on a different scale, and we know the pace has changed, but throughout your career, are there any lessons that you could draw on how that compares to today, or builds readiness for dealing with the disruptors of today?
In terms of disruptors, there have been some very significant disruptors in history, of course. I think some of those that have impacted us in the consulting profession the most have been on the economic or the technology side. So if we think of some of the great market crashes where everybody thought that we were in a boom in the global economy that was going to go on forever, and all of a sudden the bubble bursts, and organizations are scrambling to figure out how they're going to manage in a very depressed market. Management consultants have had to come to the forefront to really support their clients in that way. If we think about technology or automation, that's another major disruptor. That one's happened more gradually. It's kind of like the storm brewing on the horizon. You see it coming, and you don't realize it's there until all of a sudden a competitor, if you're in a private sector organization, a competitor figures out how to automate something that you haven't, and all of a sudden they're beating you in the market on price and quality and so on. So management consultants also have had to really figure out how to stay ahead of the curve to help their client organizations in that way. But COVID was the king of disruptors, at least in this century, in terms of impacting so many people so deeply, so many cultures, so many economies, and so many businesses, because it really was across the board. And this caused the depth of disruption that I don't think any of us could have predicted. And to me, at the end of it, looking back 2 years ago, it's given us so many lessons in terms of the resilience of people, which drive the resilience of organizations, and that ability to move ahead. And management consultants, I'm so proud of my colleagues around the world, how we were able to sort of, in working without any kind of templates, figure out how to help our clients to continue to survive in those very dire circumstances.
Mm-hmm. And I feel like we're at a point now where we're kind of lifting our head up out of the pandemic, hopefully, and being able to look at things objectively and how we've been able to be agile and change as that COVID-19 disruptor kind of hit us head on. And what can we take from that moving forward into the future of the profession and into future change? And so in your book, I kind of picked out a few key themes, if you will, across some of the chapters. And what I noted was that a lot of the discussion was around value, in terms of value to client organizations and value within the profession and within firms. talent, and as we know it, at least here in Canada, the talent crunch, access to talent, type of talent that is out there. And then, as you've touched on, sort of that digital transformation or digital enablement. So if we start with the professional service firms and we think about just generally this age of information and this access to information that we have, which has led to the rise of armchair experts, as we would like to call them during the pandemic. What does this mean for the profession moving forward? And how do we, as individual professionals and perhaps firms, continue to show value add for clients? And I know that's a big question, but
it is a big question, but it's an important one, and maybe I'll break it down into two parts. I think one part of that is the pace of change. So the ability of people to react was proven in the pandemic. So for example, working virtually. This is something that had been being implemented slowly and surely, company by company, and I think heads of organizations really weren't sure. If I can't see my people, or my people are going to be working, and because of the pandemic, they were forced to create virtual offices quickly, and gosh, don't people actually work better? And we're not now thinking about micromanaging people. We're thinking about outputs, because you can't be talking to someone every day or looking over their shoulder, which you shouldn't be anyway. But they're now really looking at different ways of managing people, and realize that virtual organizations can work. So that's an example of the pace of change increasing, and it's not going to slow down. The pace of change will continue to increase, which means that organizations are going to have to continue to not only be robust in terms of doing well now, but being resilient in terms of being able to react to unseen circumstances. And we just don't know where those next disruptors are going to come from. We thought the pandemic was it. Now we have a land war in Europe, and that's again disrupted larger numbers and larger pieces of the economy than we would have predicted. So that pace of change, I think, is something that we have to be aware of, and therefore we as management consultants need to be working on that leading edge. And it's fora like this, it's working together as colleagues around the world, where we share best practices, that we're going to be able to stay ahead of that curve. On the second part of it, it is that access to information. I mean, we all carry this library with us now, which is just so informative. I don't have to remember how to get home. I just say, okay, Google, what's the best way to get home? And it tells me, and it gives me the map. And even there are apps will tell me where there's traffic jams and give me alternative routes. And you can use it for business as well, in terms of you see a problem in your organization, and the tendency is to go on and find out what other people have been doing about that. Oh, excuse me. Of course, I said those words, and now my device in the back is talking to me. So it comes back to that old saying, though, a little bit of knowledge is a dangerous thing. And in terms of the client organizations, they see the symptoms that they're facing, and they're trying to work at the symptomatic level to solve those problems. And it's kind of like taking an aspirin for a headache. The headache will go away, but you haven't solved anything about the underlying problem, what was causing the headache. So the headache's going to come back if you don't solve the root cause issue. And it's the same inside organizations. It's very difficult when you're inside the organization to really objectively understand what's causing these symptoms that you're experiencing inside your organization. And that's where management consulting can really come in and help, because we've seen what happens across sectors. We've seen those symptoms before. We've seen failures in trying to solve them, and we have solutions that can identify that root cause issue and help clients to resolve that, so it doesn't continue reappearing. So part of our job then as consultants is to really figure out how do we help our client organizations and our potential client organizations understand that we have that value add that we can bring to the table.
And I see the profession in terms of designation and the credibility that comes with that designation being a big piece of that. One of the challenges I see as a young professional I understand the credibility that's built behind the designation, but how do we balance that without creating barriers to young professionals to enter the profession and for them to see a value in being a part of this credible community that's, building network and building knowledge? And how do we balance that? And do you think that we've done a good job so far as a CMC community globally to balance that?
Yeah. And that's a challenge for us at ICMCI and all of the institutes in terms of understanding that. I like to think about consulting as the industry of consulting and the profession of consulting. And the industry of consulting is growing very, very quickly. And people are entering the industry from a lot of different areas than they had in the past. So many coming straight out of university are hanging up the shingle and declaring themselves a consultant and going out and providing services to organizations. The profession of consulting is one who is investing in consulting as a career and understands the methodology of doing management consulting. So ISO 20700 certification and all of those things really help us with tools to understand that we're not in there filling a void and selling part-time work. We're in there to come in to work alongside a client to diagnose issues, use our diagnostic capability to solve those problems, and then help them to implement them. So there's kind of a diverging labor market where there's a very large number in the industry who think of themselves as consultants, but are really selling either contract work or specialized expertise to do special project work. And there's a huge amount available now on the internet in terms of platforms of matching requirements to skills. And I think that's great because it gives amazing flexibility to corporations that didn't exist 2 years ago. But on the other hand, they start to think of these people as consultants, but they're not consultants, they're part-time help. So we need to differentiate that in the marketplace. And part of that is reaching out to those new entrants in creative ways to help them understand what is the value of the profession of management consulting as opposed to just going out there and selling skills. And that is things like certification and ISO 20700, I agree, but it has to be more than that. It's reaching out to universities, partnership agreements with universities where we might in MBA classes or other relevant classes help explain what the profession is and what it means, and give some baseline courses as well in terms of what it is to be a consultant and give some of those baseline skills. And that never hurts because people graduating will either now understand better about how to use consultants or they'll understand better about how to become a consultant.
And so if we think about our relationship with clients, because I think we do need to start to build there and build the credibility of the profession within those relationships that will hopefully grow somewhat organically. And so if we think about the client relationship and the changes that are happening in the way that we engage with the client, both because of technology and just a change of pace that's happening. In my most recent engagements, and what I think I've picked out of your book is the shift towards program and portfolio type delivery and kind of capturing several initiatives or projects underneath that. And I think there's a lot of value add as consulting profession when we talk about helping clients through that type of engagement. And I've seen a shift towards us being much more involved in the implementation and not just the solution finding. So if we think about client value in that way in our engagement with client, what does that sort of shift mean in the way that we engage with clients? And how has that really changed, I guess, is what I'm asking.
Yeah, it's changing our industry very fundamentally. Client organizations are as aware as we are that, wow, things are changing and the pace of change is increasing. And we really, the future is more unpredictable than it ever has been. So the large consulting project, we're going to implement this program and it's going to take 2 years, and we're going to hire one of the large consulting firms to come in and support us in doing that work. are not as popular as they were, for exactly the reasons you stated, that it's better to think about that as the program, and then what are the portfolio of steps that we need to take to do that. Where do we need to hire expertise to help us, bring them in for that part of it? Maybe we can do this part ourselves, then hire someone else to come in and do that. And it doesn't have to be the same firm, because our client organizations have also learned that they don't have to put one large firm on retainer and go only to them, because we have virtual consulting. They can find that expertise they need from a consultant anywhere in the world and be supported as well as they could have. So from the client perspective, they're being a little bit more cautious about how they use their management consulting spend. The second part from the client perspective is that there have been, if you look at some polls, and I talk about it in the book, is that the value, the return on investment, or the value perceived by the client, is falling. So they will report that the project was successful, and yet the curve for the value return, or the ROI, is lower. So they're not perceiving that they're getting the value that they perceive from that. And what they're looking for, we believe, is someone that will walk that last mile with them. So it's no longer giving the report. I think that's been kind of out of favor for about 10 years, but it's more than that, in the sense of who can help me solve this problem, but then who will bring in a methodology that's proven to work along with the team to solve the problem, implement it, and leave behind what we need to continue to be able to sustain those improvements. So it's a whole different thinking perspective from the client organization, which we as management consultants need to relate to. And I think that's positive. I think that's a very good thing for the profession.
I would agree. And if we think about client organizations and the changes that are happening within those organizations, not just in the way we engage, but inside those operations, and this pressure to improve performance, and you touched on it in the book. And from a public sector perspective, what we've seen is this push to do more with less, and to really look at that return on investment when we're talking about service delivery and optimization of services, and looking to derive efficiencies and cost savings and cost avoidances. And one thing that I've recognized in the public sector, or that I've asked myself in engagements, is, are we building capabilities that we needed yesterday and playing a bit of catch up with the pace of change, or are we really building capabilities that we're going to need tomorrow? So our client organizations playing a bit of a catch-up game from public sector or private sector view, and are we as a profession kind of playing a bit of a catch-up game with that pace of change?
Yeah, because the pace of change is increasing so fast, I think that we're all in a little bit of catch-up mode. So we can anticipate what might happen, and we can prepare as much as we can, but we never know what the future is going to bring. So from the private sector viewpoint, I think the resilience was there, and for sure they were able to demonstrate reactions that were successful. Many of my clients had better years than they've ever had in the pandemic years, because they were able to pivot as quickly enough to be able to fill in the gaps that they perceived in the market. But you don't pivot by anticipating what you need to do. You pivot by being resilient as an organization. This means, and you have referred to it, not focusing so much on the what are the outcomes, but how is it that we do work together? How is it that we collaborate inside our organization? How is it that we're really clear about what it is that we need to deliver, so that when it's time to change, there's the system in place to get everybody to change gears and move in the same direction. That's more difficult in the public sector, partly because of the size of organizations, and partly because of the orientation of public sector organizations relating to the political realities in their time. So they have to react to what political masters are asking for, of course, colored by what the deliveries are to the public and the government and so on. But it requires mechanisms that are very robust, but not very agile. So how do they get ahead of that curve? And it does require a difference in thinking from the political level and from the in Canadian terms, the minister level, the head of the public service, and to the next level, deputy minister, head of the public service level, in terms of how do we create that resilience inside the public service.
Building that readiness and that capability. And I think we are playing still a little bit of catch up, but we've touched on a lot of the different pieces of digital enablement and those transformations. And a lot of that is the focus of change in public sector for sure, and how we can derive some of those efficiencies or those synergies in services. And so it's been a bit of a shift, even for myself. I'm not a technology consultant, but there hasn't been an engagement that I have been on yet at Deloitte that has not had a technology component to it, whether it was some sort of implementation or optimization of a platform or the way that the client engages with it. And so if we think about that change to the digital transformation world, and for those of us who are not professionals in the technology consulting realm of things, and perhaps we're talking about strategy or human capital change, what do we sort of need to keep in mind in terms of skills and keeping ourselves as young professionals and professionals in general ahead of that curve in terms of simple language to understand helping the client through those implementations? What does that look like for talent? How do we stay ahead as a profession?
There's just so many different strategies. I don't think there's one answer to that one. I think the main thing is that this is the role of institutes, and this is the difference between the profession and the industry, because the profession is all about how do we improve the state of our profession, how do we improve management consulting around the world, and that's ICMCI's mission basically. And therefore, we need to figure out how we can support institutes, and institutes need to figure out how they can support consultants to really be able to be on the leading edge and stay on the leading edge. And to me, there's no better way of doing that than enabling very robust cross-fertilization of ideas across consultants. And I think that's the biggest role of the industry. It's probably not the model that we've had for the first 35 years of our existence, where you have to become a member. And then once you become a member, you kind of work your way in. And then after 3 years of proving your worth, then you become CMC, and then you can move up in terms of specialized knowledge after that. But so therefore, it's how do we create those fora? Everyone that joins the industry has this access to knowledge, and the value seen from joining a profession isn't there from someone that doesn't understand what it might provide to them. So they feel well equipped in terms of knowledge. New entrants feel well equipped in terms of being able to network with anybody around the world. That we have platforms that will do that. So how do we emulate those platforms in a way that are specialized for management consultants, so that someone new to the industry says, wow, I've got to be part of the profession because I have access to this knowledge, I have access to this mentorship, I have access to these programs, and then I can go ahead and get certified and really sort of put on my brand the certification that I have going forward. So there's a lot of different strategies to do that. We could probably spend a whole hour just on that. But it is about thinking differently about the new entrants to the industry and realizing that they're in a very different place than they have been, and what is the value add that we can provide that, and in what form, what format, what way can we do that for them and with them.
And it has been a bit of a mental shift for me, even personally, coming from traditional legal services and the way that you develop within that profession and the types of skills that you learn, and then jumping into management consulting, no less with a big four that's delivering across the globe. That change in thought for me is, how do I develop as a professional and thinking about that global lens? And I think that is a bit of a shift that I see happening. And maybe this is a bit of a promotion of this Future Leaders Forum and this global platform that we're on, but I do see this shift, and I think some of the freelancers have caught on to this, is we can't just be learning within the silos of Atlantic region or in the silos of the country of Canada, but globally and sharing that knowledge. Would you sort of agree with that shift?
100%. It's kind of two steps. The first step is, oh, there is such a thing as a profession, and I can change my orientation instead of being a freelancer by using the expertise that I can gain by becoming a professional management consultant. I can do so much more and earn so much more as well in terms of really adding value. So it's not part-time work and just sort of filling in needs. It's really helping to solve problems at that next level. And then once one realizes there is a profession, then how do I leverage that to really help me grow my practice?
Mm-hmm. And so thinking as a young professional, and I think I have a bit of an answer to this, but I want your thoughts. But as someone who has walked through their career journey and has gotten to this point in leadership, what is your role and the role of folks like you who have walked through this journey of leadership in fostering young professionals like myself to take that larger view and that larger professional development and path through consulting?
Yeah, it's reflecting back on one's own career and through my career specifically. There have always been people there at different stages of my career who have been able to help navigate to that next level. And I think there is a paying it forward kind of a thing. So I've always, in my entire career, no matter what I was doing, volunteering was a very important part of my life and my career. Sometimes at the expense of revenue, but not at the expense of personal growth and meeting people and being able to work with in new ways. So anyone that's been gifted with a successful career in consulting does have to pay it forward in terms of mentoring, supporting, volunteering, helping with templates, whatever it might be, but sharing that expertise and helping the profession generally, and specifically new entrants into the profession, more and more of whom are young consultants joining our industry. And we really need to somehow welcome them in and help them develop and learn as well, because the young consultants just now coming in have a different perception of technology and workforce than certainly existed when I was there. So that is a viewpoint that is also very important for us to continue to improve our profession overall.
Mm-hmm. One thing that has been difficult for me as a young professional and being kind of thrown into this global world is trying to understand what my interests are to focus, because there is quite a bit of opportunity. And so how do I really kind of bring that into, what makes me happy in the profession, I guess. And so have you seen a shift from sort of this specialized, I'm a consultant in this particular area and this is my focus, to this more generalized view of, a Jack or Jill of all trades, if you will?
Yeah, absolutely. The traditional route had been you go out and you work for 15 or 20 years and you develop your specialty, and then you turn into consulting to pass it on. So, hey, that problem solved for me immediately. But when you're coming in as a younger professional or just out of university, that educational background gives you some specialized expertise, no doubt. But there's so many different ways to apply it. So part of that is, I do believe, again, through the institute, you can meet with and understand others and kind of find out what's going on and what's working, what's not. But it's also kind of like a job interview and staying involved in the target market communities in which you're interested. So going to networking events in those areas, meeting with people that are in that sector, maybe not even so much to sell work, but is to understand what is happening in that sector. What are those unsolvable problems that they're wrestling with that they can't deal with? And it doesn't take too many meetings before you start to see those trends developing and see where your niche might be. Because if you're starting to envision, oh, these are things we could try, that's a pretty good indicator that would be a good specialty for you.
Yeah, I think I've seen this shift, or maybe a focus in my mind on what are those skills or the type of work that I like doing, and less what is the topic? Is it healthcare? Is it justice? Is it education?
Yeah.
It's more, what is the type of work that I like doing? And I find it translates quite well across many sectors. So that's the approach that I've kind of taken, and I think it'll evolve over time. I'm sure there's many on the call who are probably walking that same path of trying to figure out who we want to be when we grow up. So
That's true.
conversations like this help grow that, right?
Exactly. And the beauty of management consulting is that it doesn't need to be sector specific. The old route where you're growing up and doing 20 years and then moving into consulting, you kind of are locked into a sector because that's your whole experience base. But so many of the problems that industries are facing now across sectors, and I think to a large degree public sector as well, are more human-based issues and how we do work kinds of issues, as opposed to the technical aspects of it, which is fairly easily available. And that's real value add from management consultants, because often those people who are successful are doing things right through intuition and experience. But if we can bring methods and a deeper understanding of root cause issues and systems inside organizations that need to be in place for success, then we can help almost any kind of organization to do those things better.
Mm-hmm. And so if I take us back again to client value, if we think about firms and growing through this change, and we've talked a bit about what that looks like as a profession, as it relates to relationship with clients and the type of experience and expertise that we can bring to client. There has been that shift to return on investment. And if you think about pricing and how you engage with client and what that sort of structure of a project looks like, how has that changed?
I think many in the profession have been working to change that over time, and it's it changes a lot in a lot of different ways, but we not as a profession have settled in on kind of the best way to actually measure what is that value added return and then build a client for it. So the two most popular methods still are either a project. So I will do this for you, and these are the deliverables, and this is the cost, and they say, go for it. Usually as a consultant, we're using our days-based fee to figure out what that cost is going to be, but it's kind of invisible to the client. Or we sell hours. So we say, this is the project. These are the things we need to deliver. I'm estimating it'll take these many hours. This is the cost per hour, but we'll report monthly and bill you monthly in terms of how many hours we've spent with you. The value add is very attractive to people, because I know in my own practice, there's huge return to organizations that successfully implement our methodologies. But how do you measure what is the impact that I have given on them? So it'd be nice to say, just give me 10% of your increased profit as a result of what we do. That would be a lot nicer paycheck for me. But there's so many moving factors in terms of environmental, economic, people factors, that it's pretty hard for me to be able to say after a year, this was because of the work that we did. So as attractive as it is to us in consulting, it's kind of hard to measure effectively unless you're doing something very, very technically oriented.
Oh, yeah.
Where you can demonstrate that you have X number fewer employees because I've implemented this automation. That kind of thing works fairly well. But for management consulting, generally, it's more difficult. So I think the most important part is for us to really understand from the perspective of the client, what is the value we're bringing? Where can we really add the best value, and then what is the fair compensation for us in doing that, and then figure out what the best way is to measure it. So it's not a perfect solution, but it's the real world we're dealing in.
Mm-hmm. And have you seen more interest in the market to take that route of return on investment, if you will, or what has been the value of the optimization that perhaps you helped implement? Have you seen a greater interest in that in the market?
I'm seeing more and more talk about it, but I'm not sure that it's being successfully implemented more.
Okay. That's a fair point.
Yeah.
Okay, interesting. I think maybe we'll turn to the floor to see if there's any sort of pressing questions at this point. And if not, we can keep going with conversation. But I don't see anything in the chat, but does anyone want to come off mute? Do you have something that you would like to ask?
Well, while people are thinking about that, let me just add one comment to a couple of questions ago about specialized expertise for young consultants. Yes. The one point flew through my mind, and then it was out too fast for me to say it, was that one of the really important aspects of expertise necessary is actually managing your firm. Whether you're a sole practitioner or a small firm and you have a couple of people, that as much energy often ends up going into managing that, just like any other entrepreneurial organization, managing the people inside the firm and making sure that that is being done well. And one of the most important, sorry to say, pieces of expertise that a consultant has is the ability to market and sell. We have to get our name out there. We have to be sure we're in front of clients, and we have to be able to pick up the phone. So all of those things have not changed at all in terms of being a management consultant.
If no one has a question, I do have one. Have you seen a shift in young professionals wanting to do a bit of that marketing and sales? And is it a shift from what would have been, traditionally building your personal practice before you kind of start going out to market?
Well, a large part of the practice, once you're established, does come from repeat and referral business. So I think a successful client does depend on that to a large degree, but it's the starting out part. So how do I get my name out there? How do I demonstrate that? So we have better tools than we've ever had in terms of social marketing and ability to put out websites. I created a new website, spent a lot of time and effort on it, and actually almost every week I'm spending time and effort on it. But it was 9 years before I got my first actual cold business contract. Just signed it in fact last week with a client that found me on the website and didn't know about me before. So the website has kind of become the most important calling card you have. So if you've been out talking to people, they'll check your website, just make sure that everything they've heard and kind of reinforce their desire to work with you. But as far as cold selling, it's not there. So it's the combination of the social marketing, the web, your email, whatever, but also just getting out there and meeting people. And that's another thing that the industry is good for. The Institute is very good for.
Steve, I see your comments in the chat. Feel free to come off mute if you had a thought you'd like to share.
Yeah, my name is Aruna. I'm calling from Sri Lanka, joining from Sri Lanka. So basically something that actually it's rather than a question, wanted to have a discussion. Right? So basically, I have done some projects during the pandemic, and I have used technology to kind of a greater extent, right? So there are tools like Notion, ClickUp, and Quillbot, and Docker, and likewise that definitely helps the consultants to work remotely and take the consultant work forward, connecting with the client. And of course, all those things can be used with status quo tools like Microsoft Teams, Zoom, and Google Meet, likewise. Okay, so the thing that actually what I wanted to highlight is, right, so when we come up, okay, of course, all these Zoom and Microsoft Team kind of tools, like the businesses were forced to adapt them, and businesses were forced to accept them. But what I have seen is in certain situations, when we come up with those tools that we could use in consultancy, the adoption or the level of acceptance was kind of lower than us with the businesses. So if you can shed a little light on that, please.
This is the number and types of tools that we have are absolutely amazing, and I think we have shown that we can use them effectively in ways that we didn't anticipate in 2019 that we could use them as effectively. And I agree with you. There's often a mismatch between the client and the consulting organization. I know from my own perspective in 2018, 2019, I was spending a lot of time and effort into automation and virtualization of some of the programs and services. So I was fortunate enough that by March, April 2020, I was in a really good position to offer my services virtually. But I didn't close a virtual contract until early in 2021. Simply because clients weren't quite ready to go there. They sort of hunkered down and wait. I had work waiting for me in Asia, but they'd say, well, let's wait until you can fly in and we'll do it then. But we finally converted after a year of pandemic and saying, okay, let's go ahead virtually. And it works. You know, we can demonstrate success through those kinds of things. So I think it's kind of, Aruna, it's kind of a two-pronged thing. It's us being expert in these different types of platforms and us continuing to educate our clients about how we can use them effectively with them.
All right, thank you.
Thank you
If
very
I
much.
could add to that, Dwight, from public sector perspective, you know, everything was in person, of course, before the pandemic, and you traveled to be to client site, and then the pandemic happened and there wasn't really a lot of option. And so the switch to virtual happened very fast. And I think it was a bit of a silver lining for public sector and this realization that we can work virtually. It can work. We can do this. And, you know, it was difficult at first because being ambitious young professional wanting to use all of these different tools that are out there, but remembering to keep it simple, and usually that's the best approach when folks are joining virtual world for the first time sometime. I think there might have been another question in the chat. I wish to get Dwight's thoughts of the role and importance of cross-border collaboration now and in the future.
I think the pandemic has done a huge amount to lower borders all around the world. I know from the perspective of ICMCI, before the pandemic, our role was with institutes, but because of the access and acceptability of virtual, with Rima, who's on the call here, we were able to put on seminars which were international in view. So members of institutes could collaborate together using this platform in a way that they never had done before. So that was absolutely amazing. And as a result of that as well, events that are happening in institutes for management consultants are now attended virtually by management consultants from other institutes from around the world. So I think that's great. This cross-pollination is absolutely amazing. So in the same way that's worked within our industry, client organizations are also realizing that they're not stuck. You know, once you go to virtual work, you realize you don't have to hire people that are in the same city you can hire in the same province or the same country. And then the penny drops, oh, I can hire anywhere in the world. If it's a completely virtual organization, virtual job, if they have the skills, then I'll be able to do that. Of course, there are economic and political kinds of reasons for why that may not work, but I see those barriers lowering. So I think more and more we're going to see that from the client perspective. We're going to see more and more virtual workers from different parts of the world. And we're also seeing that in consulting firms as well. Consulting firms are collaborating with each other across borders to provide services. And some of the big firms are now setting up a lot of their staff in different parts of the world virtually and part-time. It's sort of expertise on demand as opposed to keeping a very large payroll, again, for that flexibility to provide support where it's needed. In terms of the way clients are buying is changing. There's no question about that. So we mentioned earlier the not so much big projects the way they were, that they're tending to set up smaller projects and put them in place in a serial path, as it were, to get things done. They're also really being quite discriminating in terms of what it is that is the problem that they want solved. So they will often go after specialized expertise to solve a particular problem. The risk for that from the client organization side is that they might be looking to source someone to solve a problem at the symptomatic level instead of at the root cause level. And I think that's one of the biggest education pieces that we can do to provide support to client organizations, is understand that value add that we can bring. I like to give the issue with project management. Many organizations have trouble with their project management. Projects are always late. They're over budget and they don't deliver what you expected. So the temptation is for the head of the organization to go online, find a project management expert, and bring them in to help them develop a project management system. So you can get a great project management system after 3 or 4 months, but then after 3 or 4 months, projects are still late, they're over budget, they don't deliver. It's because the root cause issue is around accountability and authority, getting the right people in the roles and being clear about delegating who does what when in order to get this project done. So they've bought the service using specialized expertise that they thought would solve the problem, but it hasn't actually solved the real problem.
If I can, Dwight, I know we're talking about management consulting, but I'm going to selfishly talk a little bit about project management since we're on the topic. As a young professional, I see them both being very important, both growth in, consulting methodologies in the application, but also project management skills and methodologies in that application. And I haven't seen so far in my engagements where there hasn't been a component of building capability and readiness, mostly capability within organizations to continue that type of project management skill and capability after we've kind of exited. And was there a time where that wasn't quite true? And has there kind of been a shift to consultants also bringing in that project management skill and methodology?
I think there's been an increased understanding of systems in organizations about getting things done. And the very large organizations, I think, do pretty well because they have the resources to be able to create that project management source home inside the organization, expertise that can be available to support and provide guidance for managers who need to do the work. The big missing piece has always been that the project management team is not accountable for implementing the change. It's the managers and directors that are accountable for their own service units that are accountable for implementing the change. And that's a big aha for most organizations, that they miss out on that. So they are holding the project management team accountable to get the work done. But if the managers and the directors haven't bought in, then the change is not going to stick, or it's going to take way too long to do, and so on. So I am seeing exactly what you've said, that if we come in as management consultant, we can give them that aha moment, and afterwards they realize that they have been putting the accountability in the wrong place and can do better in the future.
And have you run into situations in client engagements where there isn't the capability or role that exists to take that accountability, and so therefore you've had to play the role of not just consultant project manager, but really kind of tied to the hip and buddying, if you will, with the client to help drive the delivery?
That's exactly where I find myself most of the time, actually. So it's not just taking on the role, but it's the tied to the hip. Who's the best person in your organization to learn this and to drive this? And I will support that person, but I'm not going to do it myself. But at the end of the day, at the end of the project, you'll have someone who's very good at this because they will have learned it by working alongside with me throughout the project.
Along the way, building that readiness. I've seen that as a big part of the engagements I've been on so far, is that transfer of knowledge and that building of readiness at the end for handover. I know we're getting close to time, so I want to make sure I open the floor again. Are there any other questions or folks that want to come off mute? Lydia, I see you coming off. Do you have late night comments?
Yes. I wonder whether Dwight can give us a quick insight into your book. This is a very brief one, Just buying your book.
Oh, thank you very much. The book, I brought it over here, is consulting through uncertainty, a global perspective. I do have to thank K-Mind Consulting. This was again one of my colleagues that I've met through ICMCI. We did some work together in China, and they asked some significant questions about what is happening to the consulting industry. Where is it going? And I was blessed to have worked for 3 years as the chair of ICMCI during this time, and just learned so much from my colleagues around the world. So they actually invested in research capability to be able to do some of the research for the book. And if it weren't for them, I just wouldn't have gotten around to putting it all down in paper. So thank you to K-Mind. So the book is available on Amazon, either in e-reader version or they now magically somehow print it and send it out in paperback copy as well. So it's available there. And we really do look at the different aspects of what's happening to professions generally, what's happening to client organizations generally, how are client organizations changing in terms of how they buy consulting services. And then the fourth chapter is all about, if you're in a consulting practice now, how do you prepare for growth and change, or perhaps even moving into different countries or territories.
Grateful to everyone on this call. It's really energizing to come together on this platform and learn and share knowledge. And big thanks to Dwight for being here and taking us through the journey and teaching us young professionals what it is that we need to know to grow up. And I don't have any more questions. And if there's none from the floor, I think that we're able to close out the session.
Well, thank you, Jana. I really appreciate your coordinating this, and Gergana for all your work in Future Leaders, and Rima and Josema for organizing these things, and then to all of you for participating and asking the great questions. Thanks for being here. Really appreciate it.